Reese, who do you want to be listening to our conversation today?
I want the type of person who may be still figuring out their life.
Welcome to Low to Grow, the podcast transforming life's toughest moments into opportunity for growth. I'm Annie, a Forbes Under 30 technology founder whose entrepreneurship journey ran parallel to a mental health awakening. In every episode, I sit down with inspiring individuals and delve into how they managed to turn their personal or professional challenges into opportunities for growth. If you're facing uncertainty in your life, feeling down, or simply need a kick of inspiration to keep moving forward, this is your space for the honest and uplifting conversations that you will want to hear. Hit follow so you never miss an episode, and let's dive in. Today's guest is someone who proves that age is no barrier when it comes to global impact and visionary leadership. Joining us is Reese Wong, a force of nature in the world of social entrepreneurship and community building. Reese is the award-winning founder of ISSIA Hong Kong, a youth-led nonprofit that enables global citizenship education through peer-to-peer and project-based learning. Since 2019, Reese has brought on over 500 volunteers to launch over 30 projects on the United Nations SDG goals, even earning a nod from the NASDAQ. Then moving from Hong Kong to London, Reese continued to build communities that challenge the status quo. He is a World Economic Forum Global Shaper and also the President Curator of the Second London Hub. Reese has been recognized for his work by the Diana Award in 2024, Aspen's UK's Rising Leader, and also the Royal Society of Arts. Whether he's speaking on stages worldwide, advising governments, or working with institutions like McKinsey and Ashoka, which is the world's leading community of social entrepreneurs, Reese brings bold ideas and quiet discipline to everything that he touches. I am intrigued by what we're going to be discussing today. And Reese, welcome to Low to Grow.
Thank you for having me.
Before we start, Reese, who do you want to be listening to our conversation today?
I think I want the type of person who may be still figuring out their life. Maybe you're in your final steps of university. Maybe you just entered university, but you're still figuring things out. I want this episode to be for you because I think even though, I've had this whole journey since I was 16, I think every step of the way still involves some sort of, I guess, lack of full clarity. And it was always this type of, I guess, search for answers, but also, I guess, search for advice that I think really pushed me to where I am today. So yeah, this is an episode for those who are still uncertain, for those who are figuring things out.
Fantastic. I cannot wait for you to go into that. But first, let's rewind a bit. Before ISSIA, before the awards. So Reese, what was life like growing up for you?
I was born and raised in Hong Kong. And I think really my whole life, I think I was pretty sheltered. I think I was in a world where, my parents was able to provide me with English language education, which I think made a big difference in my life. I think I was brought up where I'd had access to international schools in Hong Kong. So I think that really shaped this foundation where I was able to access a lot of opportunities because of the fact that I spoke English at a native level and because I was able to tap into this international network as a result. But yeah, I think very early on, I was still very academic. So it wasn't very entrepreneurial. I was quite risk averse and, I was doing the traditional type of activities you might expect, debate, Model United Nations, but I felt quite boxed in. And I think even then and even now, I was very introverted. And I think I never really, at that point, escaped out of my shell. I didn't really find a sort of driving force or really a reason for me to be doing things. So there wasn't really a solid internal compass or will since, the day I was born. I was sort of coasting. I was sort of on autopilot. But that obviously changed around when I was 16, around 2019, when I think really my social entrepreneurship journey, but so much of where I am today could be traced back to that very early moment in my life as well.
What prompted you to begin your social entrepreneurship journey, Reese?
If I trace back a bit as well, something I did do during my childhood, I guess that is like slightly notable, is I loved sort of organizing things or arranging things. So, but at that point, there was no direction, there was no strategy, there was no thinking behind it. Maybe it was an inclination. But I remember in primary school, as you'd expect, there's a playground, there's a lot of toys, there's a lot of sort of resources, and what I do is every break, I would basically myself and a group of friends, we would get to all the resources and all the toys ahead of time. We'd get all of it and we'd set up a trading station. That was what I called it back then, a trading station. So we would set up like a little hut, like a booth, and we would sort of organize the trade of these toys. And it sounds really kind of absolutely wild looking back at it now. But I think even at that point, it was this inclination to organize or to lead. But again, there was no strategy, there was no direction. And I think that was one of the early moments. In high school, I still felt boxed in and very academic. But I realized after doing an internship at a mental health charity, actually, all the way back in 2019 when I was 16, that I found so much joy simply through learning by doing. This magic of being able to see something through from creation or ideation to creation. And that to me was such a great way for me to learn, to feel that I was generating some sort of artifact or deliverable and output. And I think that really sparked in me this desire to work on projects, to scale projects, and that led me to start my first nonprofit organization, ISSIA HK, which is now all about project-based learning, getting young people to work on projects, getting them to work with other young people for this sort of peer-to-peer model. Ran that for 3 years, eventually passed it along, but it's still going quite well through two new leadership teams after me. And that was really, I think, again, a journey that had its up and downs, but I can trace so much of what I do to that decision, that moment where I realized, wow, I really like doing, really like learning by doing. And that really sparked something in me.
That's great. And it's so nice to hear that what you have created is there, it still runs on. And I think it's the sign of good initial setup and good leadership to be able to pass on an organization to, successes and their successes, and for it to still run and to still grow by itself. Super interesting that you mentioned that you had worked at a mental health charity. How did you end up there?
So this was very early on. I think I was in like grade 10 and 11. And I was very passionate about social issues, but in the context of something like debate and then in MUN. And I think the issue was that was very far removed from the real world. You were debating things in a chamber, you were never really doing anything about it. But something that I noticed back in high school that was quite real was this sort of mental health problem that I think in international schools, people were discussing it more, but it was still quite stigmatized. I think my angle especially was around sort of toxic masculinity specifically and mental health, and doing some work while during my internship, writing some blogs and articles around it. But it felt really tangible because that was a real problem and something that was quite real and material for high schools in Hong Kong versus a lot of the really macro issues that you debate in a competition or you'd sort of just theorize. And I think that felt real. And through that experience, yeah, that was a starting point. I ended up doing a lot more different social issues. But I think to me, mental health was something that was very, very real, very practical, and something that you could experience at any point in time, in high school, especially.
You mentioned quite an interesting point earlier about how mental health, the conversation around it, whether it's in an international school in Hong Kong, could be perhaps a bit different to what it is across wider Hong Kong.
Hmm.
When you were still studying and growing up in Hong Kong, what was the conversation that you were hearing around mental health?
The angle was a lot around mindfulness. I can remember back then there were already sort of workshops around being mindful and having, these like meditation classes. And I think there was a wider conversation along the lines of even substance abuse. A lot of these topics, I guess, wouldn't fit into the educational curriculum. But I think the conversation on mental health was never really even in international schools, very explicit or particularly informative. It wasn't built into any course. It was probably a guest speaker that came in, or for one of these internships that a student might work on, or for a service project. So I think that it was a conversation that was happening, but at that point, and this is 20 like 18, 2019, it was still something that schools were figuring out how to really build in via an external provider, for example, through one of these charities or youth groups that they bring in a speaker. But I don't think there was really a full on strategy yet.
Interesting. And you also mentioned toxic masculinity. What does it mean?
Yeah. So my understanding of it is that these traditional conceptions of masculinity, and I remember one of the blog posts I wrote was like linking back to this Macbeth quote about what makes someone a man. And a lot
Oh,
of times those conceptions actually hold you back because you're not able to fully express yourself, what you believe in, be in touch with your emotions. But also, as a result, you might not be actually a better leader because you're actually holding yourself back from being truly authentic. So I think my view of traditional masculinity is a lot of what is viewed as strength is sometimes unnaturally meshed to this notion of what means to be a man, for example, and that can be very damaging for someone's mental health.
is that something that you see either affects your life or perhaps friends of yours?
Yeah,
Um,
I think
with
for myself as well. I think I don't like adhere to that traditional model. I think like when you try to be authentic in your leadership, for example, for a lot of my events, there's this sense that, oh, you should put in, I guess, in traditional event organizing, like less effort. You should pretend that you don't care. A lot of these, I guess, not necessarily just masculine, but these types of emotionally distant approaches for a lot of my work now is actually going the reverse. It's being very intentional, very curated, very sort of high touch, and trying to get to this level of deeper emotional connection. So I think it's something I'm working on. I think for a lot of my events, I realize, wow, people actually value and appreciate that versus this sort of low touch, mass scale approach, very transactional way of like relationship building, for example.
mm. I like how you were able to realize that even when you were at high school. I also like what you said about traditional views of masculinity and how that could actually be a bit detrimental to good leadership. When you were first setting up ISSIA, how did you actually get it off the ground? Because, building something that's maybe just an idea to something with over 500 staff volunteers and delivering on these projects must have taken a lot of work. What was your approach to getting it step by step?
The organization had a few advantages. One was that in the ecosystem, which is Hong Kong, there wasn't really something at that scale and that level of coordination on that topic area at that point in time. After we just launched the organization a few years on, we see a lot more of this sort of young, even high school social entrepreneurial culture come of it. But at that point, it wasn't ever really this type of organization. People started their school newspaper, for example, their local based service projects, but there was never something at this scale. So the concept was very simple. Initially, the whole concept wasn't really even a service or a product. It was literally this idea of a network for people to talk about social issues. And we started off with issues like mental health, LGBTQ plus rights, for example, just civic engagement more broadly. But then we realized, oh, a network without a reason for being or a strong way to continually engage people would dissolve over time. It was very difficult to keep up the engagement if it was simply just a aggregation of people. At that point, I introduced a magazine, a very simple idea. Schools had their own local magazines, but simple pivot was this idea that it would be an inter-school magazine. The novelty, the early mover advantage there allowed us to reach out to schools and say, hey, would you like your students to be contributors for this magazine? And I think a lot of the times the issue with schools outreach is that you ask for free promotion. But in this case, we were presenting, I guess, an exchange of value. We're saying this is an opportunity for your students to contribute, get their work shared across this school network. And it's a great way for them to practice their skills and project based skills. So they were willing to help us promote it. As a result, we started off with like 5 schools, 15 schools, and eventually we had like 60 schools. And also people who started off as writers, editors, illustrators who ended up doing other things in the organization. So I think that was really the nitty gritty of how it got started. But I think the advantage was that, again, the concept was so easy, right? A magazine, it's not something new or completely innovative or radical. But the fact that we did it at scale and we were able to, I guess, move first allowed us to really expand quite a bit in the early years.
Hmm. It's often those simple ideas that actually end up having the largest impact. Reese, was there ever a moment where there was a project or perhaps something else within ISSIA? It's something that you've really poured your heart and spent a lot of time working on, but when it just didn't really work out?
Oh yeah, definitely a lot. Quite a few. There's a few. I think one was a sort of big one was my attempt to really turn it into a full-blown social enterprise. So graduated from high school. I actually took a gap year. I was doing other things. I was working as well. But one of my missions was actually to really turn ISSIA into a self-sustaining, profit-generating, service offering social enterprise. Up until that point, we were operating mainly on grants. We are very low cost as well, purely volunteer based, and the occasional grant that came through. And I was really trying to figure out, is there a way to really take it to the next level in terms of product, service, and offerings? And the conclusion was no. And I think the takeaway there was that I tried different strategies, possibly like commercializing the magazine, working with schools, I guess from a B2B point of view as well. But I think the takeaway there was that there are some things that you don't need to necessarily change. So the reason the organization was able to do so well for the first few years was specifically because that it was purely volunteer led and there was a power to that. The fact that the network of 400, 500 people who were dedicating time in this multi-departmental organization, and there was value in that. And that's such a powerful model. But yeah, couldn't really crack turning it into a full-blown social enterprise. And I realized at the end of the day, I didn't really have to. The organization is still going well, but it also made me look at different other types of like business models, other ways to scale. And of course, now I'm in London working on other projects as well. But I think that was a very insightful lesson on like, again, if something isn't broken, you might not actually need to fix it or innovate for the sake of innovating.
Love that. I actually really, really do agree with what you said about not fixing something that isn't broken and how sometimes some structures in some organizations are just good the way that they are and they're not meant to be scaled because if they scale, then you lose that personal touch and the actual impact that comes from them. And almost, it's the magic that goes behind it. Interesting. So, Reese, I know that you mentioned that you grew up in Hong Kong and then you moved to the UK. It's two very different cultures. Did you ever feel like you were straddling two worlds? And were there any challenges that you found, or were there any perhaps benefits that you found being in that particular position?
Yeah, for sure. I think there are definitely quite a few struggles, right? Like just initially figuring out the landscape, the ecosystem, both like personally and professionally. In terms of what opportunities are out there. How do I make the most time out of my university days? What sort of network should I perhaps join or people I should meet? The way I was able to overcome that was this, I guess, entrepreneurialism that I took throughout a lot of my nonprofit journey. I started this journey all the way back in 2019. I started university 2022. And because of this habits I built, or these sort of reps, I call it, of just being able to put myself out there, go to coffee chats, go to events, organize my own events, put myself up for leadership roles, a lot of the things compounded. So I realized that actually when I landed in London by 2022, I already had a head start because I already had this habit of being challenged, being in uncomfortable new spaces, being the youngest person in a room, being the only Asian person in a room, a lot of these new situations I was used to, or I sort of built like a resilience to because I started so early and I had like 4 years to, I think, really push myself in all these different new ways. So I think that definitely did help.
That makes sense. When you were speaking, you actually made me think about my really early days of founding Quantum Dice, which happened straight after I finished my master's. And when we were initially doing business development and going to conferences and attending roundtables, it was with some quite senior level people across the country and also globally in our industry. And there were so many times when I would look around the room and I would think, I am in a room with people who are at least 2 or 3 decades older than me, with a lot more industry experience, whether it's in science or whether it's in commercialization. And I would at times feel quite insecure, but then at times I just thought, well, there's a reason why I've been invited to this room. And I have a reason of wanting to build what I'm building with my company. And I need to make sure that I make the best use out of this opportunity. Completely agree with what you said about is that constant exposure to rooms where you are different and to situations that make you feel uncomfortable that actually allows you to really grow. And as you said, gives you perhaps a head start and there's more of a sense of a comfort when you next enter these rooms. Question for you then, because you've actually taken on leadership roles from quite a young age, so it was 16. Did that ever come with a pressure to appear that you have everything figured out?
I think so. Yeah, even now, I think when I'm now 22, there's a sort of expectation that once you do something very well, that you're able to keep doing better and bigger and greater things. And I think that's definitely a pressure I still feel now. But I think what helps is also, again, back to that reps thing, opportunities compound over time. I once traced back a lot of the things I do today, and I was like, what would be the original source? Or, yeah, what is the first cause of a lot of these opportunities? And it was exactly that step I took at 16 to start this nonprofit, which went to this first work experience or led to this one connection, which opened this door, which opened that other work opportunity, and so on and so forth. So I think, yeah, there's that pressure, but I also think there's that sense of responsibility as well because of all the opportunities I've been given since starting this organization to really make the best use of it and to really push myself as well. It is pressure, but I think it's also intrinsic in a way now where I use it as a way to channel myself to do more and to create more impact.
Your conscientiousness in how you approach work and also your studies and also your life is very inspiring. I also read that last year you were awarded the Princess Diana Award. Could you share a bit more about what led to that amazing milestone that you had?
Yeah, basically 3 different tries throughout my whole life for that award. I think the first time I tried for it was like just before university at like 2020. Then I tried again in like 2022. And then in 2024, I finally did get the award. And that was a really, really satisfying moment. And I think, I guess a lot of it again traced back to how taking social action all the way back really did shape the trajectory of my life. The award is really a reflection of having started making that choice quite early on. And I think really shaping my life dedicated towards public service, towards social entrepreneurship and innovation and education. And I think, yeah, that was is an amazing moment.
Reese, can I ask? Because most of the social entrepreneurs that I meet when I speak to normally have quite a personal reason for why they decided to go into either public service or do something that's more social impact based rather than for profit. Are you comfortable sharing what your personal drive is?
Yeah. I think my drive is this sort of deep rooted sense that when you're sort of brought into this world, you sort of have limited amount of time. I think they say in your career, you only really have 80,000 hours, right? And as a result, I sort of look back and I think about what do I want to achieve with this 80,000 hours that will comprise my career. And I also think about what is this legacy I want to leave behind. And I think public service, social entrepreneurship, a lot of this work around systems change, or just entrepreneurship more broadly, is always looking to tackle these huge problems or looking to tackle problems at scale. And I think to me is this deep sense of that it is the best use of my time to be trying at least to solve these problems or to push myself towards making the biggest impact possible in the very limited amount of time one has on this planet. So I think that's what really drove me, is that the sense of this is the best use of my time. This is where I could leave the greatest amount of a footprint and impact and have the most counterfactual impact as well. Was this sense of I should be doing something more. I have this opportunity to do more. And impact is something that is beyond oneself, right? It's very outward facing. You're able to actually create a ripple effect or a change in someone else and eventually possibly even a system.
Who or what do you think helped to shape this really innate desire of yours to create impact and impact that really lasts?
Yeah, I think my parents for sure. So they're both like academics. So there's always that sense of, I guess, for a different way. And this is through, I guess, research and education, a way to like give back or to give forward. And I think that is also my same sense where the two big things I want to solve is one, this idea of human potential. Again, back into my journey starting at 16, all these different moments, there was no real strategy behind it. It was because I had the right exposure, the right environment, but also the initiative to take advantage of it. But a lot of the times you might not see that play out again and again. If I was in any different environment, it might not be the sort of same outcome. So I realized that there is so much to do with like, how do you maximize a young person's potential? How do you let them see the full scope of opportunities that they could work towards, whether that's career, whether that's university options, subject choices? The big force that I've been working a lot on is this idea of how do you actually maximize a young person's potential? Another bucket is this idea of community building. So I think I see myself very much, even now, still an introvert. And I realize so many times in so many situations where events were just not properly curated or were not very intentional, very big rooms. And, as someone who's very introverted, you might get socially anxious. I know I have in a lot of these very large, uncoordinated environments and crowds. A big thing that I'm trying to solve for a lot of my projects is, can you bring people together in a better way? Whether that's for dinners, whether that's for the way you organize boot camps, a level of intention and creation. These are like these big issues that really drive me. But I think again, that internal drive, I think comes back from my own struggles with these issues. But I guess also the sense that was given this opportunity through my own initiative, but also by happenstance. How do I pay it forward? And how do I really, yeah, help other people, young people realize their potential, but also help people better connect with one another?
That's a very beautiful way to look at the world. And yeah, thank you for all that you are doing. Um, Reese, for some of our listeners, and they might be, university students, or they might just be starting out in their career, say they are also introverted and they also identify with being socially anxious in these situations. What are some pieces of advice that you would give to them to help them be able to connect more with others, either in their professional community or in their personal community?
100%. So I think two major strands here. One is that instead of going to events, you could take the step to organize your own. And again, that may sound daunting initially, and that sounds even worse potentially than going to an event. But what that gives you is control, but also creation. It allows you to set the terms of how you're going to engage with other people. And also is a great excuse to reach out to other people. So I think that's one, is that you can create your own spaces, set your own terms. And number two is also creating magnets. So it's similar to sort of one, but it's this idea of just pursuing your passions, but also communicating your work. So whether that's for personal branding, building a public, but you create excuses for other people to reach out as well. So with number one, you have an excuse to reach out to other people. With number two, you create magnets, interesting things that you share and you share a lot about, which gives other people an excuse to reach out to you. As a result, you have a very good system of outbound and inbound that allows you to build relationships on your terms in both of these scenarios. And I think that's helped a lot for me. And I think for an introvert, rather than this very scattered approach of just going to random events or, you know, just trying to send random cold emails or messages out to people, you can really optimize it for both outbound and inbound to really create your own network.
That's great. So create your own network and also take more of a leading role so that you have something to do at an event. And I actually feel like a lot of the introverts I speak to also share that recommendation, which is if you have a task to be doing at a networking event, then naturally people will have a reason to come towards you, which is the magnet, as you so eloquently described there. So, Reese, another question for you, because you've had to balance studying at a competitive university, building a community, doing the World Economic Forum Global Shapers for the London Hub. What are some lessons that you have learned about balance in order to prevent burnout?
Firstly, it's being in a position where you can set boundaries. So a lot of the times as a student, that might not be realistic. You have lectures, classes, you have responsibilities. But what I found very useful is I'm oftentimes, if I'm in a leadership position or if I'm the one sort of reaching out or setting up an event, you have more control over when these events take place and at what time. And as a result, you have more control over your calendar. So I think that's actually one nifty tip is, again, maybe counterintuitive, but try putting yourself in situations where you can set the agenda. But I think secondly, it's also, again, time boxing, this ruthless prioritization. I struggle with this too, even now, but it's being able to say within a month or within a year, what is actually the thing I want to accomplish? And is this specific engagement or thing going to contribute towards that? That could be one. But also, secondly, if you look at how much time you're spending, does it accurately reflect what you want to achieve? And if not, you can change it around and you could focus on things that actually get you to where you want to be. So I think there's all of that. But I think it's, especially if you're someone who's ambitious, who's doing a lot of things, you might still end up in a point of burnout. What has helped me as well is being in this state of mind where I think I'm able to be resilient, but also be quite calm. So I don't get stressed easily, which is a good thing. I'm able to, I think, really see challenges or setbacks as something exciting and something that is a learning opportunity as well. And I think that mindset shift is also quite great. Having this internal locus of a control where I don't necessarily overthink about things that are outside my locus of control, outside of things I can control. And I think that really helped you have a very solid anchor to be just more resilient and more mindful.
Is that something that you've always had, or is that a quality that you've had to develop?
I think definitely I had some inclination of it early on, but also something I developed. For example, let's say you send out many, 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 many applications, and if it gets back to that exposure point, and let's say you keep aiming higher and higher, but perhaps like you get a whole suite of rejections and you have a whole set of setbacks. But at a certain point, you realize that you keep getting rejections, but you keep still achieving your goals and you keep sort of moving along these lines where you just realize that a lot of these rejections, a lot of these setbacks, a lot of these missed opportunities are just part of the journey. And I realize that now, whenever something doesn't go the way I want it to, or I don't get this, let's say, award or this opportunity, I'm totally unfazed because I realize that as you set yourself up for more ambitious goals, you're also probably going to face more and more rejections, regardless of compounding effects, regardless of your ability to really spiral upwards. You're still going to face more rejections simply because you're operating at a higher level or you're improving yourself. So I think, again, I see it as a natural part of my journey, but I think it's something that took time. It took that early set of rejections, set of missed opportunities, and seeing a lot more of it definitely, I think, helped as well.
I like that actually, because what you're saying is when you're facing rejections or when things don't go as you hope they would, zoom out and look at the bigger picture. And I think I see this graphic where it shows success isn't linear.
Mm,
Over a longer period of time, it's going upwards. But then the nitty gritty, as you were saying, so in the day to day, you're going to have ups and then downs. And sometimes you might have loads of downs before getting one up. And what you're saying there made me think about when we were doing our first fundraise and we literally spoke to 100 different investors and only 3 said yes, but we only needed 3 to say yes. So it's also about having a balance and also having that grit to keep going, even when things initially don't work out. What you said earlier also about if you're operating at a slightly higher level, the more your career grows or the deeper your career grows, the higher the opportunities are but also because they are larger opportunities, then if you don't get one, then it seems like a larger failure. But it's actually you have tried, and it's the trying that counts, and it's the not giving up. And earlier, when you were saying that last year in 2024, when you were awarded the Princess Diana Award, which is a super prestigious award, I loved how you were able to just say straight away, well, it's the third time that I applied for it, and I was actually rejected twice before. But I love that you just kept going and you had that belief in yourself. But of course, from the time of your first application to your last application, you must have done a lot of work on your project and also on yourself in order to be awarded that. So congratulations to you. One question, and this is something that I love to ask and also learn from people who are very busy and who like to keep a lot of plates spinning. Were there any personal sacrifices that you have had to make in order for your career to go well?
A lot of it. I think big one is a conventional university experience would possibly look like some divide of maybe spending 50, 60% of your time on academics, maybe the remaining 30% of the time on like some form of social life, and then maybe the remaining 20% on careers. Maybe that's a sort of archetype of sort of a conventional, well-balanced student. But I think a lot of it, because of this sort of fixation or this desire, I think, to do more, and again, like the natural busyness of just working on so many projects, I think a lot of the times that balance is definitely off whack, where academics have to end up being like a 10%, 20% social life as well. It's therefore so inextricably connected with your work, with your projects. And I think that definitely is a sacrifice. Some may say you spend your university time really having a lot of time for introspection, for self-discovery, for slowing down. But I think as someone who's busy, as someone who's very ambitious, you can still find time for that. But a lot of times you find yourself simply within 3 years, for example, just having not that much time to really sit back and fully reflect or to really enjoy the slower, quieter things of being a university student. And I think London itself definitely impacts that as well. The fact that for us at LSE, you walk out the door and you set foot in the city and you're surrounded by so many opportunities and the abundant things that you can do. So I think there's that sacrifice. Is the past few years, I definitely didn't feel much like a university student.
So what's next for you, Reese?
Yeah, a lot more community building, a lot more self initiated entrepreneurial projects, running a few more startup communities, doing a few more talks as well, and then deciding between a career in government but also the private sector and like management consulting as well. Hopefully to do both, have a world where I can really combine that expertise. But yeah, still figuring things out.
I'm very excited to see where you end up, although I'm sure that I will hear a lot of all the other activities that you're doing in the meantime as well. Two questions to bring this to a close. First question is, who are three people that you look up to? And the second question is, what is one thing that you think will allow more people to have better mental health?
So I think for the first three, there's quite a few. I'd say firstly, my parents for sure. Maybe that's one or two, where I think it's this, I guess, conscientiousness or this like desire to just be able to do hard work, which I think is something that really, really life has like set me up in terms of as a foundation. But I guess like the other category, and it's mainly maybe more an archetype than a specific person, but a lot of the people that I surround myself with and I see a lot more are people who just have very high degree of agency. And some of them are entrepreneurs, some of them are working in policy, some of them are working on completely different areas. But one thing that I really admire and look up to is this sort of uninhibited sense of agency and this idea that one's life, no matter the circumstance or the external environment, is within your control and that you are able to control your outcome. And they put that into action, right? Whether that is for building a company, whether that is for finding very unconventional third doors to different opportunities, whether that's simply being uninhibited by external pressure, by stereotype, by expectation. And I think that's something I'm still working towards. And I think that's something I look up to a lot. I think for the second question, I think my advice would be, again, to really set boundaries. And I think back to what I mentioned is put yourself in situations where you are in control. It allows you to have more control over your life, but also as a result, you are in a better position to set boundaries and to, again, really think about what are the things am I working on in a given day? Are they aligning with what I want to achieve? And as a result, have this greater sense of fulfillment and self-actualization. So I think that's my advice is find ways or systems or approaches, communities where you can set the agenda and you can, set the boundaries that allow you to fully realize your potential.
Reese, thank you so much for sharing that. It's been such a pleasure to have you on my podcast. And I feel like I've learned a lot from the insights that you shared as well. And to me, your desire to give back to the community and to the world in general is loud and clear. And I am so excited to see what you're going to be doing next.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me. This was a great conversation.
That's a wrap for today's episode of the Low to Grow podcast. If it resonated with you, leave a review and hit follow to help more people to find important conversations. Keep growing and see you next time.